The wind howled across the dry plains as the town of Dustrock slumbered under a pale, unforgiving sky. Noonlight sliced through cracks in shuttered saloons and bounced off rusted horseshoes nailed to battered doors. The town looked half forgotten, as if time had paused here out of pity. That's when they saw him, just a silhouette at first, moving slow down the main road, horse and rider both shadows against the blinding sun. He didn't wear a badge, didn't raise a hand in greeting, just rode in with a slumped posture and a battered hat pulled low over his eyes. But it wasn't the man that stopped folks in their tracks. It was the horse beneath him. The animal was limping, its every step a symphony of pain, hooves trembling beneath a coat stained with sweat and dust. Blood clung to its right hind leg, not fresh, but dried into dark smears that told of long miles and little rest. The animal's breath came in ragged huffs, ribs showing under taut skin. But still, it walked, because the man on its back willed it to. Sheriff Walt Hannigan stepped off the boardwalk, his worn boots hitting the ground with purpose. He had been Dustrock's law for 30 years, and in all that time, he'd seen broken men, wild mustangs, drunkards with revolvers, and more than his fair share of desperation. But nothing about this moment made sense to him. The rider pulled the reins gently, and the horse stopped in front of the sheriff, trembling but still standing. The man slid off with the cautious grace of someone who hurt in more places than he let on. His coat was patched, and his boots had walked more ground than a cattle drive. But when he finally looked up, his eyes locked with Walt's, and something in them, some flicker of pain buried deep beneath resolve, cut through the sheriff like a knife. "You lookin' for a doctor?" Walt asked, nodding toward the bleeding animal. "No," the man said softly, his voice low but steady. "I'm lookin' for a place to rest. For her. Just for a while." Walt's eyes narrowed. That horse shouldn't be standing, let alone carry a man into town. "She's stubborn," the rider said. "Always has been. Just needed her to make it here. After that—" His voice trailed off and he looked at the horse. Gently, reverently, he touched her neck, and she leaned into him with a quiet, pained sigh. The way he held her, like she was something sacred, made something tighten in Walt's chest. "What's her name?" Walt asked, softer now. "Faith." The sheriff said nothing for a long moment. Behind him, townsfolk had gathered, murmuring among themselves. Some whispered about putting the horse down, others about the foolishness of riding a dying animal into a desert town with no vet and less mercy. But Walt held up a hand and the murmurs quieted. "You got a name?" he asked the man. "Cole." Just that, no last name, no explanation. But Walt didn't press. He saw the way Cole's shoulders sagged, how his fingers lingered on the horse's mane like he wasn't ready to let go. There was history there. Pain too old to name. "You hungry?" Walt asked after a beat. Cole looked surprised, then nodded once. "Yeah. She needs water more than I need food, though." "There's a trough behind the station," Walt said, motioning toward it. "Cool water. Shaded too." Cole led Faith around the sheriff, each step deliberate. She stumbled once, and he caught her gently, speaking to her in low tones like calming a fevered child. Walt watched them disappear behind the building, and felt something stir inside him he hadn't felt in a long time, something like pity, maybe. Or respect. An hour later, Faith lay in the cool dirt behind the sheriff's station, eyes half-lidded, breath slow but even. Cole sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder like he was trying to anchor her to the world. Walt had brought him a plate of stew, untouched. Instead, Cole fed bits of soaked oats to the horse, fingers steady, voice low and soothing. "She saved my life more times than I can count," he said, not looking up. "Back when I didn't care much whether I lived or died. But she did. She always did." Walt leaned against the post nearby. "That so?" Cole finally looked up, and in his eyes, Walt saw years of loneliness stacked like dry wood ready to catch flame. "We were in New Mexico. Border country. I was runnin' with the kind of people you spend your life puttin' behind bars. She was just a foal when I took her. barely old enough to stand. I trained her up between jobs. She was the only good thing I had." Walt didn't interrupt. He knew a confession when he heard one. "We got ambushed. The gang turned on each other. Greed'll do that. I got shot bad. Crawled out of the canyon bleeding and alone. Would have died there, but she found me. Stayed with me. Carried me out 2 days straight. Busted up her leg in the rocks, but didn't stop." "She been limping ever since?" Walt asked quietly. Cole nodded. "Sometimes better. Sometimes worse. Last few weeks worse. And now, she's got one more thing she wants to do." Cole's voice cracked. "I promised her she'd see this place. It's where she was born. Dust Rock." Walt's breath caught. He remembered a stormy night almost 20 years back. Mustangs driven from the hills, foals pulled from the mud. A rescue, small and quick, but the town had taken pride in it. Few survived. Fewer stayed. But one, a little filly with bright eyes and a crooked back leg, he remembered. "She was one of ours," Walt said softly. Cole nodded. "I never told her, but she knew. She always knew." They sat in silence after that, the kind that wraps around you like an old blanket. No one came to bother them. The townsfolk kept their distance, sensing something sacred in the scene. Faith drifted into a shallow sleep, her sides rising and falling with effort. "You came all this way just to let her rest?" Walt finally asked. Cole looked at the horizon. "She carried me through hell. Least I can do is give her peace." Walt stood there a long while, then finally said, "She can stay here. As long as she needs. So can you." Cole didn't answer. But the way he exhaled, the way his hand found the rhythm of Faith's breath, said everything. And still, somewhere in the back of Walt's mind, a question burned quietly. What kind of man rides a dying horse into a town that hasn't seen him before, just to keep a promise made in silence? The answer, he knew, wasn't simple. But it was coming. Cole's days in Dust Rock settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind of slow passage where time seems to stretch, but wounds don't quite heal. Faith lay mostly still beneath the cottonwood tree near the sheriff's station, her breathing shallow yet steady. The horse's dark eyes held a fragile light, flickering like a candle in the wind, and Cole watched over her with a devotion that carved itself deeper into the lines on his face. Sheriff Walt Hannigan had kept his promise. He arranged for a local vet, an old man named Doc Palmer, to come by, even though the town's resources were meager and the vet's hands shook with age. Doc Palmer's prognosis was grim. The infection in Faith's leg had settled deep, and healing seemed more a hope than a likelihood. Still, Doc Palmer treated the wounds with slow, careful hands, applying salves and wrapping bandages as Cole held Faith's head, murmuring softly to keep her calm. "I don't reckon she'll last long," Doc said quietly, "but she's a fighter." His eyes lingered on Cole, reading the man beneath the worn coat. "And you don't seem like one to give up either." Cole managed a faint smile but said nothing. He was no stranger to loss, and Dust Rock's dusty air carried the weight of many forgotten endings. Yet something about Faith's stubborn breath kept him tethered to a thread of hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was all he had. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the wooden storefronts, Cole wandered through the town. Dust Rock was a place of ghosts, empty streets, weathered faces, and a silence that wrapped around you like a shroud. He passed the old blacksmith's shop, where the bell above the door jingled faintly in the breeze. Inside, the blacksmith, a stocky woman named May, was hammering metal with steady, practiced strike. May looked up as Cole approached. Her eyes softened, the hard edge of the town's suspicion easing a little. "You're the man with the horse," she said simply. Cole nodded. "That's right." "She's a stubborn one," May said, glancing toward the station where Faith rested. "Ain't much left of her, but she's got fire." Cole's gaze followed hers. "She's more than fire. She's my reason." May wiped sweat from her brow and leaned against the anvil. Dust Rock's seen plenty of reasons come and go. Sometimes, a man's reason can change the town. Cole met her eyes, feeling the weight of those words more than their promise. I don't expect much. Just a place to see the horizon one last time. May nodded, her face thoughtful. Then you're in the right place. We all carry our ghosts here. Back at the sheriff's station, Walt kept an eye on Cole, though he rarely spoke more than a few words. There was a quiet respect between them, two men bound by the heavy weight of past regrets. One afternoon, Walt finally broke the silence. "Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" he said as they sat beneath the cottonwood's thinning shade. "Riding that horse all the way here. You could have found shelter somewhere on the way." Cole looked out toward the distant hills, eyes clouded with memories. "I didn't want her to see anyone else. Didn't want her to be just another case. Faith and we've been through hell together. If I had to leave her behind, I'd be leaving a part of myself." Walt nodded slowly, understanding the kind of loyalty born from years of hardship. "That kind of bond, it's rare. It's all I've got left." Days passed with small moments, Cole brushing Faith's tangled mane, speaking softly to her about the plains they once ran together, the nights spent staring at the stars and remembering a life that felt like another man's story. Sometimes, the townsfolk would stop by, hesitant but drawn by the quiet dignity of a man who refused to give up on a dying horse. One evening, as the sun bled orange into the horizon, a group of local children gathered near the station, whispering excitedly. Walt watched them, then called Cole over. "Seems Faith's story is spreading," Walt said with a wry smile. Cole laughed softly, the sound rough but genuine. "I reckon she's got more life left in her than I thought." But beneath that laughter, there was a deep current of fear. Every breath Faith took was a gift borrowed from fate, and Cole felt the tightrope snapping beneath his feet. That night, as Cole sat beside Faith, the horse stirred restlessly, ears flicking toward the night sounds. Cole's heart tightened. He knew this dance wasn't meant to last forever. Suddenly, a noise from the street stirred him. Footsteps hurried, voices low but urgent. Walt appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "We've got trouble," Walt said. "Town's been hit by a gang riding through. They're stirring up dust, scaring the horses. Could spook Faith." Cole stood, feeling the old ache in his bones flare up. "Let me handle it." Walt shook his head. "You're here for her. That's what matters." But Cole's eyes were steel. "No. This is my fight too." The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But don't do anything reckless." Outside, the wind had turned cold, slicing through the night with sharp edges. Cole stepped into the dim street, the echoes of hoofbeats pounding behind him. The gang's shadows danced on the walls, wild and dangerous. Cole's heart thundered, not just with fear but with a fierce resolve. He wasn't the man he used to be, the reckless rider caught in a life of chaos. Now he was a protector, and Faith's spirit rode with him, fierce and unyielding. As he approached the gang, his voice cut through the night, calm but commanding. "You're frightening the town and the horses. This ends now." A sneer met him, but Cole didn't flinch. He stood tall, every scar on his body a story, every breath a promise. The leader laughed, but in that moment, Cole saw something flicker, a respect or maybe recognition. The standoff stretched, taut and fragile, until finally the gang backed down, melting into the shadows as quickly as they had come. Cole returned to Faith, breath heavy but steady. Walt joined him, nodding with approval. "You're not just fightin' for a horse. You're fightin' for a future," Walt said quietly. Cole sank back beside Faith, exhaustion pulling at his limbs. Yet in the silence that followed, there was a fragile hope, one born not just from defiance, but from the belief that even in the harshest dust, life could find a way to bloom. And as Faith's slow breaths mingled with the night air, Cole knew the journey was far from over. The morning light spilled softly across the dusty streets of Dust Rock, casting a gentle glow on the town's worn buildings and stirring a quiet hope within Cole's heart. Faith lay beneath the cottonwood tree, her breath still fragile but steadier than the day before. The vet's treatments were slow miracles, each day a small victory against the creeping shadow of illness. Cole watched her with a mix of reverence and restless determination, unwilling to surrender to despair. As the town began to stir, the murmurs about the man with the dying horse grew louder. People who had once passed Cole with wary glances now approached with tentative smiles and quiet offers of help. May, the blacksmith, brought a bucket of fresh water and a warm loaf of bread, her hands rough but kind. Walt, the sheriff, made sure a blanket was spread beneath Faith to keep her comfortable, the lines around his eyes softening with genuine concern. Despite the gentle care, Cole felt the weight of time pressing in. Memories came unbidden, nights under endless skies, the wild freedom of their early days, and the moment when the injury had changed everything. He recalled how Faith had stumbled during a storm, her leg caught in a hidden gully. The pain in her eyes had mirrored his own, and from that moment on, their journey became a battle against fate. In the quiet hours, Cole's thoughts drifted to his past, fragments of a life shaped by loss and stubborn hope. He had once been a rider full of dreams, roaming the open plains with a heart unburdened. But years of hardship, of hard choices and harder losses, had carved a different path. Faith was more than a companion. She was a living reminder of what he had fought to keep: freedom, trust, and the courage to face whatever came next. One afternoon, as the sun leaned low, casting golden hues over the town, a stranger arrived, a woman with eyes sharp as the desert wind and a presence that stirred the quiet streets. Her name was Clara, a traveling healer and horsewoman who had heard whispers of Cole and Faith's story. She offered her help with a calm confidence that intrigued Cole, though he remained guarded. "I've seen horses like Faith before," Clara said softly as she knelt beside the mare, examining the wound with practiced hands. "They carry more than just pain. They carry the will to fight." Cole watched her work, a flicker of hope igniting within him. Clara's gentle touch and steady voice seemed to breathe life into the fading embers of Faith's strength. As days passed, she stayed in Dust Rock, offering her knowledge and forming a quiet bond with Cole that neither expected. Their conversations were measured, each word revealing pieces of their own stories, wounds both visible and hidden. Clara spoke of roads traveled and battles fought, while Cole shared fragments of a life lived on the edge of survival. Through this exchange, an unspoken understanding grew, a shared resilience forged in the fires of hardship. But even as Faith's condition improved, the shadow of the gang's threat lingered. The town's fragile peace was a thin veil over a simmering tension, and Cole knew that their safety was not guaranteed. The memory of that cold night, when he had stood alone against the gang, haunted him. He feared that their return might bring more than fear. It could shatter the fragile hope that was blossoming in Dust Rock. One evening, as the sky deepened into twilight, a restless energy settled over the town. Cole sensed it before the first shouts echoed through the street. Horses whinnied nervously, and the distant clatter of hooves grew louder. The gang had returned, more brazen than before, their intentions dark and dangerous. Cole stood beside Faith, steady despite the rising tension. Walt gathered the townsfolk, preparing them to defend their home. Clara's eyes met Cole's, determination shining bright. This was no longer just a battle for survival, it was a fight for the future they dared to imagine. The confrontation was swift and fierce. Dust kicked up in swirling clouds as voices clashed and horses stampeded. Cole moved with the ease of a man who had faced the wildest storms, his every action a testament to years of hard-earned skill. Faith, though weak, rose to the challenge beside him, her spirit unbroken. In the heat of the struggle, Cole faced the gang's leader, a towering figure whose sneer hid a fractured past. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the echoes of old pain and new hope collided. Cole's voice was steady but fierce. "This town stands for more than fear. We protect what we love." The leader faltered, the fight draining from him as something deeper surfaced, respect, perhaps, or the weight of his own choices. Slowly, the gang withdrew, the dust settling over a town that had refused to break. As quiet returned, Cole knelt beside Faith, her breathing labored but steady. Walt approached, placing a firm hand on Cole's shoulder. "You didn't just save the town. You saved all of us." Clara smiled softly, her presence a steady anchor. "And you saved her." Cole looked around at the faces gathered, worn, hopeful, and unyielding. Dustrock was no longer just a place of forgotten dreams. It was a home forged by resilience, trust, and second chances. In the stillness that followed, Cole whispered to Faith, his voice filled with a quiet promise. "We're not done yet. There's still a road ahead." And as the stars blinked awake in the vast desert sky, a new chapter began, not just for a man and his horse, but for a town reborn from the dust.
The night after the gang's retreat, Dustrock seemed to breathe again, the heavy weight of fear lifting slowly from its shoulders. Yet, for Cole, peace was fragile, as delicate as the steady rise and fall of Faith's chest beside him. The mare had survived the battle, but the true fight, the one against time and fate, was far from over. By dawn, the town was stirring with quiet determination. The earlier haze of uncertainty had transformed into a cautious hope, fueled by the knowledge that together they could face the worst. Cole rose from the porch of his small cabin, sunlight casting long shadows across the weathered boards. He moved carefully, every step measured, mindful of the ache in his own bones that mirrored Faith's lingering pain. Clara was already at the barn, her hands busy cleaning the makeshift stall where Faith rested. Her presence was steady, a beacon of calm and competence. She glanced up as Cole approached, her eyes reflecting both concern and a spark of something unspoken, trust forged in adversity. "There's progress," she said softly. "Her strength is returning, slow but sure. If we keep this up, she'll walk again." Cole's throat tightened. Hope was a fragile thread, but he clung to it fiercely. "She's stubborn," he replied with a small, wry smile. "Just like me." Outside, the town's heartbeat pulsed with renewed energy. May hammered at the forge, sparks flying like tiny stars, while Walt coordinated repairs to the damaged fences and boarded windows. Dustrock was not just healing, it was rising. The scars left by the gang's visit were still visible, but they were becoming stories of survival rather than defeat. As the morning wore on, Cole and Clara worked side by side, their bond deepening with each quiet conversation and shared task. She revealed pieces of her own past, a life shaped by loss and the constant search for redemption. Cole listened, the walls he built around his heart beginning to crack, allowing fragments of vulnerability to slip through. "You've carried a heavy load," Clara said one afternoon, her voice gentle but firm. "But sometimes it's the weight of hope that keeps us moving forward." He nodded, the words settling deep within him. For years, he had ridden alone, burdened by memories and regrets. Now, with Clara's steady presence and Faith's slow recovery, a new path was unfolding, one carved by resilience and the quiet strength of second chances. News of Faith's progress spread through Dustrock, drawing curious eyes and cautious smiles. The townsfolk, once distant, began to share their own stories of hardship and healing. Children stopped to watch as Cole led Faith to corral, her legs trembling but determined. Each small step was a triumph, a silent victory over the darkness that threatened to consume them all. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, Cole sat beside Faith, brushing her mane with careful hands. The mare nuzzled him softly, a gesture that spoke volumes without words. Around them, the world seemed to pause, caught in the delicate balance between past pain and future promise. Walt approached quietly, his sheriff's badge catching the fading light. "You've done more than anyone thought possible," he said, his voice low and sincere. "This town owes you a debt it can never repay." Cole shook his head. "I just did what needed to be done." But even as the praise settled over him, a restless thought gnawed at his mind. The gang's retreat was temporary. Their shadows lingered beyond the horizon. Dustrock's fragile peace was a beginning, not an end. Days passed, and Faith's strength grew. With Clara's guidance, Cole began gentle exercises, coaxing the mare to trust her legs once more. The work was painstaking, each small victory hard-won through patience and persistence. Yet, with every step Faith took, Cole felt a piece of his own spirit heal, as if their journeys were intertwined by fate. One afternoon, while they rested beneath the cottonwood tree, Clara shared a story from her travels, a tale of a horse and rider who had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger. Her voice was soft, weaving hope into the fabric of their shared experience. Sometimes, she said, the hardest battles teach us who we really are. Cole looked at her, the weight of years reflected in his eyes. I've been fighting for so long, I forgot what it meant to hope. That's why you have to hold on, Clara replied. For her, for yourself, for all of us. That night, as the stars blinked awake in the vast desert sky, Cole sat alone on the porch, the silence filled with memories and unspoken dreams. Faith's gentle breathing came from the barn, a reminder of the fragile thread between survival and surrender. He thought of the road behind him, the losses, the pain, the moments when giving up seemed easier than going on. But more than that, he thought of the road ahead, uncertain yet full of possibility. The bond between man and horse, forged in adversity, was a testament to resilience. In the quiet darkness, a single truth shone bright. No matter how hard the journey, there was always a chance for redemption, for healing, for a new beginning. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Cole made a silent vow to ride that road with faith wherever it might lead together.